We're back live. Let's go on to the next talk by Tor. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Great, thanks, Sally. So I'm going to talk about FCC developments. I talked a little bit about this back at the last community meeting in the summer, and so whoops, I'm passing the wrong slide. So I'll talk a little about the international developments, in particular the feasibility study, and then touch on the European Strategy Group. Mike Tutz will go into much more detail on the following talk about the European Strategy Group. And then I'll talk about developments within the US, and in particular the HFCC organization, and then what we're doing in terms of the R&D programs, and finally next steps. So in terms of the feasibility study, the FCC feasibility study was released in March. I think it was posted on the archive in April or thereabouts, shortly thereafter. Over the summer, it was reviewed by a couple of panels. The cost was reviewed in detail by the cost review panel, which is chaired by Norbert Holdkamp. And then there's a scientific advisory committee that looked at a lot of the technical details for both FCCEE as well as HH. And that's chaired by Andy Parker. And there is, at the end of the talk, there is end of the slides, there is a list of who are on those panels. It was presented to the CERN SPC and then the finance committees in September this year. And then they reported to CERN Council in November. And the council came back with a statement reaffirming the desire to continue the work that the FCC study has been doing. And in particular, it confirmed the funding for the FCC study. So now the program has evolved from the feasibility study into what is referred to as a pre-TDR phase. The TDR can only begin after the CERN Council approves the project, and there also needs to be some completion of environmental studies and whatnot as part of that. So FCC approval is expected to be considered on the 2028 timescale. Of course, all this is assuming that the council this spring approves the ESG. In terms of technical design progress, there are a lot of details that people have been working on. The L star has increased slightly. There's R&D on HTS for the arc, quadrupole, and sextupole magnets, as well as the interaction region. There's a significant down select that's planned for this January, which is to choose lattices. So that's scheduled towards the end of January. And then, there are experiments which should be operating next summer to generate positrons. And the design is looking at using polarized pilot bunches from the injector to do the energy calibration. And the original design was to actually let the bunches polarize in the ring, but that took the order of an hour or 2 hours from luminosity. The FCC team is working on, as I said, towards this pre-TDR, and so they're working on prototypes of key technology or systems that are costly and have to be replicated many times. That includes the positron source, which I mentioned is getting tested at PSI and a demonstration. SRF is critical, both 400 megahertz, 800 megahertz, RF power. The picture on the right is a mock-up of an arc cell. It's half an arc cell, so that's about 25 meters. The frame is at the right shape of the tunnel, and they'll start to populate that. Also, of course, working on the implementation aspects, site and environmental studies, boring samples, civil design, infrastructure, etc. So they're marching along, making progress on things. As I said, Mike will cover the European Strategy Group in detail, but I thought it was important just to point out a couple things. Clearly, they released their recommendations to the CERN Council. The summary of that is out there in CDS. Before that, Working Group 2A released its evaluation of large accelerator projects. A table from that report is on the right there, showing a stoplight map. And they looked at a number of different issues, right? Scope, the technical design level, what R&D has to be done, the schedule, cost, risks associated with that, whether those studies had been done. And then before that, these are in reverse chronological chronological order, the PPG released the briefing book in September, and so the link to that is there. And of course, the European Strategy Group, which Mike will talk about, is still doing some ongoing work. But the next big step is the CERN Council adoption, and then the update to the strategy document. The recommendations that the ESG released, the two relevant to FCC are here. 3A, which I think everybody knew was coming. The FCCE is the preferred option for the next flagship collider. And then 3B, the ESG recommended a descoped version of FCCE as the preferred alternate if the FCCE is not feasible. And then they noted, similar to what we actually noted in our HFCC document that we submitted to the ESG, that there are lots of other alternates, and at this stage, without knowing the reasons for which FCCE is not feasible, you can't really decide which alternate would be most applicable. And so they didn't rank the alternates. So their primary alternate was a descoped version of FCC. And what is a descoped version of FCC? The idea is to save significant construction cost. The scenarios that they suggest are to remove the top quark operation, construct 2 rather than 4 interaction regions, and decrease the RF system that's installed by about 40%, so that the synchrotron radiation beam loss would go down from 100 megawatts to 60 megawatts. And of course, that also has a luminosity reduction that's associated with it. These measures would reduce the construction cost, or thought to reduce the construction cost, by about 15%. And of course, in all cases, they could be added back in should additional resources become available. So there are other reasons that FCC might not be feasible. And one of the first ones that we were concerned about in the spring when we were writing the HFCC document is, what happens if CPC goes ahead? Well, that would kind of eliminate a lot of the motivation for FCC. This fall, the Chinese Academy of Sciences gave the green light to the Super Tau Charm facility, STCF, for the 2026 5-year plan. So that delays the possibility of CEPC going ahead. The STCF will demonstrate technologies that are very useful for FCC. So to that extent, it's a great project, and I think CERN will get engaged with it. I doubt, given the state in the US, we will get engaged with it, but there will be important demonstrations there. There are, Yifeng stated that he plans to resubmit CPC by 2030 for the next 5-year plan, unless FCCEE is approved first. So assuming approval on the 2028 timescale, then FCCE would be the world's only Higgs factory, and there's no competition. The other issue is cost and funding, or in particular funding. The cost is fairly well known, and as I said, that was reviewed by a cost review panel. Various funding models have been developed and were presented. A number of them, different options, were presented to the CERN Finance Committee. There was, over the summer, potential support from the European Union that was announced. This is for the 2028-2034 funding cycle. And they describe providing significant funding, the order of 30%, to these large private public projects that they referred to as moonshots. And the FCC was listed as the first moonshot that they were considering. And then yesterday, there was an announcement that CERN has managed to find commitments of private funding, the order of $1 billion, 860 million euros, that are pledged for the FCC. So those are significant sources of alternate funding. Of course, there's still a lot more funding that has to be found. Some of it will come from CERN budget, but there are other sources that have to be found. So At this point, let me turn to the US program. So, and Mike Tutts will go into much more detail as to what's happening with the European Study Group. Um, uh, let me turn to the US program. The HFCC, which was named at the time the Higgs Factory Consortium Committee, was created in 2024. And there were two organizations associated with it. One was the Physics Experiment and Detector, PED, and the other was the Accelerator. The structure of the two was very similar. There was a steering group, there was a lab coordination group that were independent. There were external partners, and then there were a series of L2 groups that were specific to the different organizations. And the goal was to really coordinate and plan for the program that would be supporting a Higgs factory. And the charge in particular talks about understanding physics and technical feasibility studies and the associated design and R&D, prioritizing and providing stewardship for the national R&D efforts towards the Higgs factory, developing the pre-project R&D scope that would be required to initiate a project, and providing ideas as to what would happen and how the US could contribute to a Higgs factory, to a panel that was suggested by P5 that would evaluate exactly how the US contributes. In September or August, sometime late summer, DOE thought that given the state of FCC EE and the outcome of the Venice meeting, they would focus the HFCC group on the FCCE. And so we kept the same acronym, but we changed the name from Higgs Factory. I'm blanking on what the original name was. I always get that one confused. But we're now the Circular Collider Organization. And they also changed the organization structure a little bit because Srini and I were working very closely together. They simply made us the joint FCC steering committee. And then there is a laboratory coordination group, which presumably would be the merger of the two individual laboratory coordination groups. There are advisory groups for PED and for Accelerator. There are external stakeholders, as there were before. There's also a US CERN FCC coordination committee that we had initiated. The charge and the goals essentially remain the same, but they're focused on the FCCE. And then, as before, there are the separate L2 organizations that fall below. On the Accelerator side, we really didn't do anything to modify our internal organization. The four of us, myself, Steve Gourlay, Matthias, and Jean-Luc had been working well together. There is a separate group or a separate box that we've identified as being necessary, which is community engagement or a name like that. It hasn't actually been named yet. And we nominated Vladimir Shiltsev for that. And then, as I mentioned, we had created this over the summer. Over the summer, we had created this US CERN coordination committee that consists of Mikhail Benedict, Patrick, Srini, myself, and Emmanuel, and then Frank Zimmerman. Another thing I should note is, especially on the Accelerator side, it's going to be important to engage industry as the program grows. And so we're looking at the external stakeholders, and we might include industry and external stakeholders. On the PED side, Srini is actually changing the organization more significantly, and that is being updated and it will be announced soon. He has nominated an advisory committee. The members are listed there, and they're helping him lay out the rest of the organization. The plan is not to modify the L2 members significantly, but he does want to have an additional layer in there that would be L1 membership. And again, that's being put together. We started the R&D program, and We first laid out some guidelines. We want to identify areas where the US can make leading and significant contributions using what expertise we have in the US. We want to think about the interplay between PED and accelerator and think about R&D projects which can benefit both programs. We requested on the accelerator side, we requested proposal submissions due on June 10th. The PED side was just gathering them continuously. And then we've been working with the FCC management just to make sure that our input is relevant. There are things that we may want to do that aren't directly in their interest, but we want to make sure that it's relevant. And there were already some collaborations with CERN that had already been established. And of course, we're responsible for continuing those. That includes civil design work that had been done by Fermilab, some work on an 800 megahertz cryo module that was being also done with Fermilab, interaction region magnets that were being done with Brookhaven, and then the detector R&D collaborations that had been established with the DRDs. As I said, PD had been accumulating proposals. They discussed a lot of them. The L2 group provided a prioritized list given the limited funding, and the funding guidance that we were given and then got from DOE was $500K for PED, $500K for accelerator. As I said, in the accelerator side, we had actually asked for set a date of June 10th for proposals, but we had made the proposals very simple. There were 2 pages, and they really laid out, what are you doing? What is the cost? How much have you engaged with? At the time, it was both ILC or LCF and FCC being considered. How have you engaged? Who are you working with? And we got 43 proposals with a funding request that exceeded our 500K by a little bit. And then they were reviewed over the summer by the L2 coordinators in terms of 3 things. 1, the relevance to a future Higgs factory, the benefit to the US program, including the Muon Collider or the EIC, and then interest from the Higgs factory projects, meaning FCC or LCF or CLIC. And the L2s, as I said, the proposals were relatively simple, but the L2s interacted with the proponents to gather additional information and with the FCC contacts for clarification in cases. So again, as I said, we're going to contribute to both PED and accelerator. For FY26, we have 500K for each. Now, of course, we aspire to have significant contributions. Certainly to the detectors, perhaps even leading a detector. On the accelerator side, there's some places where we have clear leadership and we can contribute to the accelerator. This includes bulk niobium SRF, running tight on time, I guess, IR magnets, high performance computing, and niobium 3 tin. And we also have relevant expertise in E+, E-, although to be honest, that's aging. And we will be building the EIC, the electron ion collider, and that has a lot of synergies with the electron storage ring, has a lot of synergies with FCCE. Of course, there are a lot of other topics in the accelerator that nobody really leads around the world. I mean, these include conventional magnets or vacuum technologies and things like that. But if we contribute a significant amount, the US may contribute there as well. Working on the IR and the MDI seems a natural synergy between the accelerator and the PED efforts. And as I mentioned, SRF and things like that are key. So for the 500K for the accelerator R&D program, we allocated the 500K as listed here. There are 4 topics. A couple of them are modeling. The 800 SRF cryo module work is important because CERN is actually going to build the cavities, but they need to design. And so we'll do the design with this 250K that's allocated. And then there's cryo module engineering for the MDI. On the PED side, there were much smaller awards made, but many more. And so I list them here. I'm tight on time, so I'm not going to go through them all. In terms of plans for FY26, so this January, there's of course the physics workshop in Munich. Srini and I and our groups plan to meet with OHEP to clarify the program, and we don't have a firm date yet, but we'd like to do that in the late winter or the early spring. There are also tentative plans to hold an in-person L2 meeting of the L2 groups on the spring timescale. And so again, that would probably be April timescale. And then FCC week this year is going to be in Helsinki in June. We will be requesting proposals for the FY27 R&D plan, and we again will probably set a date in June and then plan to review them over the summer, similar to what we did this year. And then we plan to hold the fourth US HFCC meeting at it's a joint host of SLAC and Berkeley. It will be held at SLAC, but both Berkeley was contributing. And that's planned for early September. So in the past, we've had those meetings in the late winter, early spring. The last one was mid-April. So we're waited for 18 months to hold the next one, but we think this is better timing with regards to other workshops that are being held around through the year. The dates right now are planned for either September 9th through the 11th or the 8th through 10th. Both have some unpleasantness of boundaries. And we're trying to figure out which one upsets people less. And the goal there is to present, in addition to the other topics that will be discussed, is to present some of the results from the R&D efforts. And then we'll engage with OHEP again in the early fall to discuss FY28 and beyond. In particular, what R&D will really be possible? How do we augment the US capabilities? At 500K a year, that's we're not having a huge impact. And we'll also discuss the timescale and the contributions that we need to provide to it, or we need to suggest to the targeted panel on Higgs factory contributions. So last two slides, the ways to engage with the HFCC. We have these mailing lists. There's a web page. There are monthly meetings that we have. All of these are ways that you can engage. If there's anything that any questions people have, please just email me. So as a summary, the European Strategy Group has reported to CERN Council. FCCE is the preferred option, and a descoped FCCEE is the first backup option. The US HFCC program has begun. We're using unique strengths in the US to engage with FCCE, and that is starting a pre-TDR phase and building prototypes. And so at 500K, it's hard to engage fully, but I think we're finding ways to have some impact. There's a reorganization of the HFSC, the steering steering committees, that was initiated in September to focus on FCC. There are minimal changes to the accelerator organization and to the named PED, to the named L2s in both the accelerator and the PED. The top level PED organization is being modified some, and that announcement is imminent. And then finally, I talked about the R&D efforts for FY26. They were launched, and then future plans are being developed for FY27 and 20. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tor. We have one question online from Heidi. What is the governance model for US FCC going forward?
For the workshop. Is that the question?
Well,
Heidi?
she just said generally.
Just generally, Muon Collider has a collaboration which has, elections and things like that. And the question is, what's the governance model that US FCC is planning to have in the long term?
Yeah, right now we have the two steering committees that I described, and we're not planning to have elections beyond that. Srini has requested input for his level 1 members from the community, and he's working with the steering group to nominate those. On the accelerator side, we put the L2 together, the L2 groups together last year, actually, I think in 24, talking with the community and working with the laboratory coordination group and to some extent DOE as well.
Yeah, is there is there going to be things like review committees? I mean, I served on a EIC detector technology review committee. I'm just wondering, this may be longer term, but just sort of in general, how do you get evaluation, community input, and buy-in for this project? Because having seen a collaboration uh, basically almost implode over the way in which they were running their development efforts almost 30 years ago. It's a significant effort to have a solid governance model that includes both evaluation and community buy-in.
Yeah, no, Heidi, that's a very good point. And right now, you know, at the level that we're at right now, we haven't done that, but it's something that we should really look at.
Yeah, it's something to think about for the future. We're not building it yet.
No, not yet, but soon.
We have a question from Michael Peskin.
Yes, I wonder if you could go back to slide 14.
This one?
Yeah. So, I must say this transition really surprised me. Marcel Dumarteau, as you see in the previous organization, is probably the national expert on Higgs factory detector technology. Sarah Eno has done transformative work on dual readout calorimetry. Richie Patterson has been involved in the Cornell collaboration with ILD. These people have really had their hands in at the deep level in designing Higgs factory detectors. If you look at the list on the bottom, I'm really glad to see Andy Lankford there. He's been involved with ILC at the highest level for a long time, but he's not someone who's in the trenches. And I don't think anyone else on that list has done serious work on Higgs factory detector design and technology. So I really hope that when the new organization is created, you folks take advantage of the expertise that's out there and point people who have experience and can judge proposals in relation to the physics needs.
Michael, I mean, I think that's clearly important. I believe it's correct to say that Richie, Marcel, and Sarah were asked to stay on and chose not to. When the reorganization and the refocusing was announced. So I mean, and there have been calls to the community to suggest a new membership. But and I hope you've contributed to that.
Mm.
Are there
Okay,
any? Oh,
now, you know, the future is clear for CERN, so we all have to get on the same page, and I think that means you have to reach out again to the real experts in Higgs factory detector design.
Michael, I absolutely agree, right? There is a huge amount of expertise on the detector side and on the accelerator side that we need to engage towards the FCC. And I very much hope that people at SLAC and people across the country can help us, because it's key that it's clear that there's going to be some key things that still need to be developed. I listed some of them, right? RF power sources, SRF technology, and of course, as you point out, the detector technology.
are there any other?
Daniel?
Daniel. We need to unmute you. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes, this is Daniel Elvira from Fermilab. Without necessarily endorsing the current governance model for USFCC, what I want to point out is that according to the CERN schedule, the experiments would be formed by 2028-29. And certainly I would expect that by then we have a more community-driven kind of governance. I mean, similar to what we have experienced, for example, within USEMS or US Atlas.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Daniel. Right. It's as we evolve into focusing on the detectors and a real project for the accelerator, yes, the governance will completely change.
Are there other comments or questions? If not, then thanks very much, Tor.